Hey! Welcome to the basement. Let's look at the agenda first. Today, we're going to review some basic literary analysis terms. I have 8 set aside for the project we're working on, and we're going to look at those 8 with some flashcards and some games today. But while we're over here on this agenda slide, let's just point out that we're going to make a slight adjustment here. We're actually, this is rare, moving a reading up a day. So the first reading assignment is now due 1 day earlier on Thursday. Why is that? Once again, it's because you have school tomorrow, but it's a targeted instruction day, so you don't have to show up to your class times at a particular time unless you have a teacher that has said that they want to meet with you at a time. Then, of course, you have to pay attention to those appointments. But for the most part, you have a day tomorrow to get work done. Reading is a great option. You also can read during class today, because today's class, we're going to keep it pretty basic with this introduction to your 8 literary analysis terms. Now, why am I saying 8? It's because those are the 8 that I have set aside as fiction techniques that are the way in which the author communicates between his or her text and your brain, right? The only tool that an author has to put an idea in your head. There isn't a cable, which I've talked about before, that comes out of one mouth and goes into a skull, or there isn't a cable that comes out of the book and goes into your head and acts as some sort of data transfer so that you can know, oh, I know exactly what the author's perspective on the world is. All they have is the words that they choose. So in order to increase that transfer of data, they use techniques that we recognize and identify. And these are the 8 that I've set aside that I want you to be on the lookout for while you are reading. So today I have a couple of activities set aside for practice. And so Quizlet is the place where I want you to start, because Quizlet is designed for flashcard use mostly. There are other options, like you can play a gravity game, a matching game that's maybe a little bit more interactive. But for an introduction, you should write in your notebook compelling images and then write down the definition. Compelling images, write down the definition, and then you can flip to the next flashcard. Write it down, write down the definition. So, just to repeat, I am saying that you should, before you get started on the other activities today, write these terms down in a notebook, and then you can take your notes on them. I am going to continue this video from here, going through these cards one by one, but those might not be something that you feel like you need every single one of them, and you might want to skip around and review. So the rest of this video isn't today's instructions. The rest of this video is a flashcard by flashcard explanation of what each of these literary terms are. I'm going to use Fahrenheit 451 for all of those explanations. All right, so I'm gonna stop the first part of the video here, and then I'm going to come right back going through the flashcards one by one. Okay, here we go with a closer inspection of the 8 literary techniques I want you to look at while you are reading your choice novel. First, we have compelling images. An image is anything that appeals to the senses: sight, smell, sound, touch, taste. But I add the word compelling here to remind you that images can be a lot more complex than just a pretty picture. I don't want you to fall into the trap of, oh, it's an image because I can really see it. No, the image should have meaning as well. When you think about Fahrenheit 451, think about the image of Guy's own house on fire. Or think about the image of the mechanical hound. Why does the fire department have a robot dog that isn't just a drone, but rather this 8-legged beast with a needle coming out of its mouth? That has meaning in addition to, oh, I can really see the hound. I also can feel the fear that it's supposed to instill. When we think about a relatable character, we think about a character having qualities that we can identify as really human. In some ways, this probably makes us think of Clarice, because Clarice sort of is the stand-in for maybe ourselves, someone who is youthful and optimistic and knows that wearing a free-flowing dress on an evening where the wind is blowing leaves around might have a sensation that we identify with, although we may also relate to some of Mildred's fear of the outside world and just wanting her television to tell the truth. Or we can also relate to why Guy would be worried when his wife almost kills herself with sleeping pills. So in order to be relatable, we should be able to identify a human personality. It may not be something that we see in ourselves, but something that we recognize in the world around us. We all have had Mildreds and Captain Beatty's and Clarice's in our life if we take a moment to think about it. Dynamic characters uses the idea of something that we can relate to, but adds the concept that a character can grow and change as we progress through the novel. For us, this is going to be Guy Montag. We have met him in the first page, It Was a Pleasure to Burn, and you even wrote a paper describing how his interaction with other folks caused him to see his world differently. Impactful scenes. So scene is a technical, just thinking about a play, we know that a play has the scenes divided into several smaller set designs, right? When we watch a play, we can sort of recognize that some scenery has to be moved out and some scenery has to be moved in. But the same is going to be true in any text, any narrative. When we are presented a scene, what makes that scene so interesting and worth looking at? Is it the scene where Faber doesn't want to open his door because he's so afraid of the outside world? Is it the scene where Mildred gets her stomach pumped out by two not doctors? What is it about that short sequence of events that makes us want to look at it closely? Complex symbols. A symbol is any object that presents itself in a narrative as something that should be there. Like, it can't come out of nowhere. It has to make sense. So when Guy Montag has a Bible in his hand, he doesn't just create it out of nowhere. It's one of the many books that he has swiped while on the job. But it also stands as a object that means Guy's struggle with learning to read for meaning. It also, we're going to return to this in one of the next ones, but it also is a book, if we think about what the Bible symbolizes, a book that is supposed to teach, and Guy is struggling to learn from it. The symbol of fire. Every time fire shows up in the book, it is an actual object, whether it is to burn houses and books, or if it's the campfire that Granger and his men surround themselves. It's actually a fire. But think about how both of those fires mean very different things. The fire that Guy uses to destroy is very different from the campfire that Granger and his men use to create their new society. Allusions. This is what I mentioned with the Bible. When we read the passage of Guy Montag on the subway, it's an allusion to an actual Bible verse, the lilies of the field. And we worry not, the lilies of the field. They neither toil nor spin. And if we think about what Bradbury is saying to Guy Montag and us in that moment is, don't worry about getting your life perfectly right according to everyone else. Just live in this moment and try to enjoy the text for what it is. And of course, on the subway, in that very moment, Guy can't do that. So that's a helpful allusion to something else we recognize. But that might be too complicated. You might say, oh, do I have to know the entire Bible by heart? No. Think about Guy Montag as a fireman. He is an allusion to what we think of when we think of a firefighter. His uniform, his truck, his job is an allusion to something we understand. That's helpful. Juxtapose ideas. All right. Imagine Mildred. Imagine Mildred standing next to Clarice. Why are these women so different from one another? What is the one idea that we pull out about people in the world of Fahrenheit 451 by looking at these two women so closely together? That's what it means to juxtapose an idea. You take two objects and you compare them, and from that comparison, come up with a single argument. Believable setting. And my last use of Fahrenheit 451, hopefully for the course this year, is that the setting has to have context and rules that the reader understands that creates the meaning that the author wants you to take away. So when Captain Beatty is in charge of a fire department that burns books rather than saves houses from fire, his job makes sense. He describes the history of his profession. He talks about what the rules of the firehouse are. That work that Bradbury puts in to create a setting that makes sense allows us to see stand-ins for Captain Beatty in our own world, a media environment that attempts to control the narrative. There are ways in which the Fahrenheit 451 setting, while it is fantastic, it also makes sense. And because of that, you realize that it is a society that is made up, but is a society that is made up using qualities of our own society that have just been speculated into a dark future. All right, so just remember that I went through those one by one, but you can rewatch any of those, and all of these flashcards have the definition on the back that you could look at while you are listening to me give a Fahrenheit 451 example. All right, good luck on the quiz games today. Have fun.